Hi everyone, and welcome to Billy's Test Kitchen. Today we're making quinoa pasta sauce, asparagus, and salmon. Now this might seem like a lot, but we're actually going to cook the quinoa and the salmon at the same time while we prep the sauce and the asparagus. Now today we're going to cook 1 cup of quinoa with 2 cups of water. I'll go ahead and get this started, and then we'll move over to the stove and get everything else going. So we're going to add 1 cup of quinoa and 2 cups of water. Okay, so we'll go ahead and put the lid on and we'll move over to the stove and get everything else going. See you in a second. Okay, so here we have our quinoa, and we're going to go ahead and set this on high. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cook our salmon. So on our salmon, we're going to be using a saucepan, stainless steel, with a little bit of avocado oil. We're going to make sure we spread that around. And I'll go ahead and grab the salmon. So here I have 2 salmon steaks with the skin. And I'll set that in the saucepan. I can use the salmon to make sure that oil spreads evenly. Okay, so that's set. Now, for the salmon, I'm only going to use a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. Now, my oven is off right now, but we're going to set the temperature to 450 degrees. And be sure to set your timer for 20 minutes. Okay. So here you can see the quinoa is coming to a boil. We're going to let that cook for a couple more minutes at a boil. I'm going to turn on our cast iron. We're going to add a little oil and butter for sauteing our onions. Our cast iron on high at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the heat on the quinoa so it comes to a nice simmer. And we're going to cook this slowly. You don't want to overcook it, or rather cook it too quickly. Then the water won't properly absorb into the quinoa. The first thing I'm going to do is saute my onions. Now we're going to be using the onions for the sauce. Add a little bit of butter. With the cast iron, we still have the heat on high, but a couple tricks to know about cast iron is you can play around with the temperature. You're not actually going to want to cook everything on high. There are times where you're going to cook it on high and then lower the temperature so that you can cook things evenly without burning them. Sorry about that, my alarm went off. There's no smoke, but they're super sensitive. That's okay, part of the process. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and lower the temperature for the onions. Let that sit for a second. I'm going to go ahead and put the lid back on the quinoa, make sure that heat stays inside. It was a little bit too high, so I'm going to just bring it down a little bit. You're going to be constantly playing with it, so just keep an eye on it, make sure the simmer stays at an even temperature. You'll see how it's bubbling. You want to make sure that bubbling stays nice and even throughout the cooking process. This looks ready. So again, we're going to be using these onions for the sauce. So I'm going to remove this from the cast iron pan. And now we're going to prep our asparagus. So for the asparagus, we're going to do the same thing. A little bit of avocado oil and a little bit of butter. Set that in. I'm going to let that saute in the pan. Let's check in on our quinoa. And here you're going to see there is a lot less water. And that looks pretty good, actually. I'm going to taste a little bit of this. So it still is a bit firm. And I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit more water. Bring that back a little bit high. Let that slowly cook. So while this is going, I've got my spices prepped and ready to go for the pasta sauce. And we're going to be using garlic, turmeric, cumin, and cayenne pepper. And for each of those spices, we're going to go ahead and use a quarter teaspoons. And for the sauce itself, you can choose any sauce that you enjoy, whatever tastes good for you. I recently found this. It's a spicy Tuscan tomato sauce. And I personally like the spiciness, great flavor, great taste, great sauce. But again, you can choose any sauce that you prefer. I prefer a little bite and crunch to the quinoa, so I won't cook it all the way through where it's going to be nice and soft. We're going to go ahead and season this with a little bit of salt. Make sure it doesn't get away from you. Go ahead and lower the temperature, make sure this is on low. And we'll let the heat in the cast iron pan go ahead and keep that warm for us. So our quinoa looks ready. So you can see how the quinoa has split. It's got a soft texture to it. Not a lot of water is left over. Very, very, very little. Almost completely absorbed. Okay. So at this point, we're gonna go ahead and slide over the asparagus. Bring this on over. Make sure this is on low. Bring this to medium. And we're gonna go ahead and incorporate our sauteed onions back into the quinoa. Okay, so we have our onions. We're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic. We're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric. We're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of cumin. Unless you really like the taste of cumin, you're going to only want to make sure you add a 1/4 teaspoon. It's got a very strong taste, and it can be a bit overpowering if you use too much. Cayenne pepper. And our sauce. I've already used about half of the container for a previous dish, so I'm just going to go ahead and add the remaining amount. Let's not waste. Go ahead and use that remaining sauce. Okay. Set this aside, and we'll stir this in. Go ahead and lower that temperature. Make sure our asparagus is staying nice and warm. And let's give this a taste. Okay, so we're going to add a little bit of salt. And just so you know how much I'm using, we're gonna go add 1/4 teaspoon. Set that. Let's give it another taste. Make sure it tastes good. So you got the crunch of the quinoa, the crunch of your onions, your garlic, turmeric, cumin, cayenne pepper. So we're gonna set this on low. We're gonna make sure our asparagus is on low. And let's check in on our salmon. And this is our salmon. We've got about a minute left, so I'll go ahead and let that minute in the oven. I'll grab our serving plate. Okay. About 30 more seconds for that salmon. Our quinoa pasta sauce looks great. Nice and juicy, a lot of texture, a lot of color, a lot of flavor. Go to make sure our asparagus is off. We're good at the moment. And there's the buzzer for the 20 minutes for our salmon. Wow. This is extremely hot, so always be careful. And now we're going to set our dinner plate. For the salmon, I suggest using a metal spatula. And if you like that skin, you're going to want to make sure that you get the skin and the salmon all in one piece. Set this off to the side. And grab a couple pieces of asparagus.